Welcome to the Next Level Casino Careers Show, a series highlighting industry tips and insights from the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Enjoy the show.
Dr. Bo Bernhard.
How are you? We were rocking out on that intro, man. That is some music. I was
nothing but the best for you, man. I had to make sure we had a good.
I was chair dancing. I got a bad knee, so I can still chair dance.
Hopefully the music matches the enthusiasm. I'm really excited to have you on the show here today. This, I believe, is episode 7, so we're still really early, and we're really trying to tap into the best minds in the casino and hospitality industry. Ultimately, with Next Level Casino Careers, it's about growth. It's about sharing insights, stories that hopefully people can apply to their own careers, right? So who better than Bo Bernhard, who is the Vice President of Economic Development at UNLV and also the Executive Director of the International Gaming Institute, which we'll explain more about what that means. But Bo, once again, thanks for taking some time and joining us here today.
Oh, no problem. What a cool thing you're doing here, and what a fun topic. I'm a teacher at heart, right? More than any other hat that I wear. I tell my 2 little girls, Daddy's a teacher, man. So I love these conversations, that we're going to cover today.
Awesome. So, Bo, if you wouldn't mind, rather than going through your lengthy bio, giving a little what we like to call the origin story, your 3 to 4 minute backstory, where you grew up.
Sure.
I know you have an interesting background, and then ultimately what you do today.
So I grew up in Las Vegas, as did my parents, as did my grandparents, which was not a normal thing back then. Now it's a relatively normal thing as in a city as large as Las Vegas is. But I played college sports, and when they announced the starting lineup, they announced your hometown. And so they said, from Las Vegas, Nevada, Bo Bernhard ran out the field. I had a professor came to my game once who came up to me after the game, and he said, "You're from Las Vegas? That's really weird, right? And what was that like growing up in the shadows of these casinos, right? Like, did you gamble all the time? Was your mother a showgirl? Was your dad in the mafia, right? Did you learn all these card tricks?" And I was like, "No, man, here's what it was like." And he goes, "Oh, that's really interesting. You should write a research paper on that." And I was like, "All right, that I don't know how to do research, but I thought that's a cool paper." I got hooked. That became an honors thesis. That became a doctoral thesis. I didn't know that you could just study cool stuff and be a professor. I thought being a professor meant you had to be a student like a 4th grader all the time. You just had to constantly study all this stuff all the time, right? I became the first research director at the International Gaming Institute at UNLV, which was this huge honor. And if that was all I ever did, that would have been more than enough. I then got promoted to executive director. At that point, I was lucky to be in the lead as we merged programs with the University of Nevada, Reno, including our executive development program in Lake Tahoe, which is probably my favorite program. But in our roles there, we did all sorts of things where we did research. We have a gaming regulatory educational program where the world's gaming regulators come. We have a Center for Game Innovation where they invent the next great gambling games. 18-year-old kids are coming up with really cool stuff and selling it. We have a place called Expanding the Leaderverse, which is our diversity and inclusion program for leadership in the gaming industry. And we also have significant responsible gaming programs there as well. So covering a wide range of things at the Gaming Institute. And then 1 year ago, to hopefully get this origin story relatively short, our new president, Keith Whitfield of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, who's just a fabulous guy, who's a neuroscientist from Duke. So, dumb guy, right? Not real bright. But despite that academic background, totally approachable, really cool, down-to-earth guy who asked me to serve as his vice president, overseeing economic development in a place that we call Blackfire. That's where I am right now. Blackfire Innovation is the gaming industry's innovation hub. It is a place that is named after the state's official gemstone. The Blackfire Opal is the state of Nevada's official gemstone. So there's some trivia. And not 50 feet from me now, we have like AI-driven virtual dealers and robots and an esports arena and a hotel room of the future and a cafe of the future and a casino of the future and a sports book of the future in ways that, as you can imagine, are really fun for our students, right? How cool would it be to be a student in a classroom like that looks nothing like the classrooms that I sat through? So that's the quick origin story.
There's a lot there, and innovation is a topic I definitely want to come back to. But Bo, I want to go back to something you said, because from what I know of you, I think two things I know for sure is you're proud of being from Las Vegas. And I think you said something there that was key as far as misconceptions.
Yes.
I feel like you've been defending misconceptions around the gaming industry and Las Vegas for that matter for a long time. Do you feel like that kind of was rooted in you early and helped kind of define your career path?
Yeah, I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. Definitely, Kyle. Thank you for asking that. I did. I grew up here, and I went to school in Boston. And in Boston, there is an edge, right? You know this from like if you follow sports at all. And people were just wicked cruel to the Las Vegas kid because they're like, WTF and the situation. Like, how do you exist and mocking incessantly. So I had this sort of standard defensiveness that then, of course, became an academic interest. And so, yeah, I do believe I always start our executive development program. I think this is actually fairly prevalent throughout the industry. At the executive development program, we'll have 60 people from 30 countries. And we'll say at some point, how many of you, be honest, have ever been in mixed company or a cocktail party? And when somebody's asked what you do for a living, you haven't said, oh, I work in a casino or I work for a slot company. You've said, oh, I'm in hospitality or I'm in tech. And half the room goes, I've totally done that. And I would say, don't do that. Don't do that. You're in the experience economy. You're in the fun economy. You're in an industry that actually makes people happier. If you buy stuff, you end up sadder. There's good research on this. You end up more sad because buying things doesn't make you happy. Buying experience does. And guess what experience we're in every day, Kyle? Guess what happens when you show up to, any one of these hotel, casino, resorts, right? You're in the experience business, right? In fact, you're creating increasingly diverse and increasingly complex and fun experiences in a wide variety of ways. And that's something we should be really proud of. And it's very contrary sometimes to the misperceptions that lead us to sometimes maybe not be as proud as I think we should be.
I think that's an important point, Bo, especially for those watching or listening, is be proud of what you do. I'm going to be 100% honest. Earlier in my career, I was kind of hesitant too. I was kind of hesitant to say what I do because a lot of times when you say you work in the casino industry and hospitality, there's an image there, and I know what it is. They're like, oh, so you like, yeah, go ahead.
You pointed out, I think because I grew up in the shadows of the casinos, I was always answering that question or facing that. And it drove me, as I think a lot of academics, good academics are, I wanted to find the true answers to those questions. So I know we want to talk about the Raiders here in a little bit, but that was part of the motivation behind helping the NFL and the general public and lots of anybody who was interested understand what sports betting truly was, what Las Vegas truly was, and what this industry really is in 2022, right? Today, like there are tons of perceptions that aren't inaccurate about the way the industry was. My great-great-grandfather was the first member of my family who worked in this industry. In fact, I have on my back in my own I have his name tag from he used to deal the Big Six wheel. And again, he was a dealer his whole life. I'm really proud of the people in this industry, and I think we all should be proud of one another. I know these stigmas, I know these misperceptions. I grew up in them, and it probably led me down a path of trying to answer the questions about the truth, right? What really was the case about this industry.
Yeah, and I could say that you do it well. Being such an advocate, you're a go-to resource. It was funny. I know a lot about you, Bo, but I was like looking for some things to do this interview, and man, you are a trusted resource when it comes to gaming.
Oh, thank you. I hope so.
Yeah. So, Bo, we're going to debut something new here. It's a little picture. We're going to play a little picture game. Okay. So you talked about EDP. So full transparency, I've been through the ED program. And I think it is, as we talk about next level casino careers, it might not be available to everybody, but it is a resource that probably you should consider, if you do want to take your career to the next level. So let's start with, so these are from my phone, Bo. So
are they really? That's like Tahoe.
Yes.
That is stunning.
For those watching, you could see the image here. This is from my phone, so it's not the prettiest or the best, but why is EDP in Lake Tahoe, Bo? And then I guess, too, to take a step back, I know you kind of mentioned it, but what is the purpose of EDP?
So the Executive Development Program was founded in 1990, because the gaming industry was then really a baby industry, and it didn't have an executive development program, right? It wasn't a grown-up industry that had loads of programs at Stanford Business School or Stanford Medical School for physicians or whatever, right? And so Bill Eatington, one of my mentors at the University of Nevada, Reno, created it, and he put it in Lake Tahoe, and it has since had over 1,500 alums who in dozens of countries are now C-suiters, leaders in every world imaginable. In fact, half the strip now is run by EDP alums and a number of folks in the tech sector too. And the reason it's in Lake Tahoe is because we really talk about elevating the industry. It's literal in Lake Tahoe, right? Like we're going to go up here into the mountains, into this stunning environment that allows us to take a breath, to get away from our everyday pressures and the sort of monkey brain that goes with that, right? That's the phrase that we use often for work anxiety is the monkey brain's just going and going and going. We're up here. Let's take a breath. Let's take a step back. And let's talk about the things that can elevate the entire industry, that can demonstrate to the world that this is an industry of integrity, of leadership, of good. Again, back to our previous conversation. And the reason it's in Lake Tahoe is I have never been any place on the planet that better facilitates that mindset. There's an old Mark Twain line that it's like never have humans' eyes ever set themselves upon a more beautiful sight. And the first time I read that, I thought, all right, Twain, there's a million beautiful places in the world. Come on. And then the first time I ever drove over that mountain, and then you see that crystal blue water in this stunning mountain backdrop, you go, all right, Twain, maybe you had something there, brother. And it is designed to be a place to take a breath and really think about, as you point out, elevating your own careers and elevating, in doing so, the entire industry.
And
that elevation.
I have nothing but good things to say about the program. And if I remember correctly, is it 9 days, 7 days? It felt like 3 weeks.
Yes, 9 days. It is typically like a Friday night through the following Sunday. And we always say it's the toughest week you'll ever love. How much did you sleep that week?
Not a lot.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm like, you see this picture here. Obviously, I got out of the hotel, but man, do you spend a lot? Your brain is just overloaded between amazing speakers, insights, group work. The list goes on and on. So,
well, the way the day works for those who aren't, don't know about it, it's a standard 9 to 5 days of speakers and really cool exercise. Some of which are surprise exercises that we tell folks you can't tell your colleagues who go next year about this exercise. But then at 5 o'clock, everybody goes back to their team rooms because you've been assigned a team room. And if you happen to be an executive from San Manuel, from the Yamava crew, you might be partnered with somebody from Australia, another person from Macau, another person from Ghana, another person from Mexico, and another person from Poland. And you've been assigned a group assignment that is a behemoth. And of course, then what that requires is a lot of work in the teams after hours. So yes, you do get to see these sites, but it is the toughest week you'll ever love, we always say.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I'm going to give a quick breeze through, a little peek behind the hood. Like I said, this is directly from my phone, and one of the things is connection. Yes. So we can't reveal too much, as you said, but one of the things that's really unique about this program is within those 9 days, there's an opportunity for connection and activities. And you could just see from the smiles on the faces that's genuine.
That's amazing. So that's a poker night, right? And I'm comfortable sharing that. I am looking. There is one AGA Hall of Famer in that photo. There's another person in that photo who recently was elevated to CEO. There's another person in that photo who is now atop the Singapore Regulatory Authority. There's another person in there, without naming names and embarrassing folks, who is atop the food chain at IGT. And these become lifelong friends, right? That's the cool thing about it, is you get to know these folks, right? Oh, there you go. There's some more crazy folks. There's a really crazy dude in the back. My gosh.
Yeah, you're right. And I know some of these groups talk to each other all the time. I know that this group of people, our group, Robbie actually was just on property a couple of weeks ago. Awesome. He reached out. Ben is now a CFO. And as you said, just so many different folks that you connect with.
There's Chandra, there's Kelly. It's funny you remember these folks, right? Because it becomes such a great group.
Yeah. And then another thing too, beyond the connections, it gives you confidence, Bo.
Really? Well, that's
For
good.
a lot of people, like for myself at the time, you're within one organization, you kind of, you have a thought or understanding that, I think I have potential. I think I'm going down the right path, but it's not really until it's almost like, I know you played sports growing up. For me, it was basketball. It's when you go to basketball camp and it's the kids from the other school, right? And you're like, oh, I can play, like it's yeah, like these guys trust these people trust me. Like
Yeah.
I can actually pull my own weight, and
Yeah.
these are different from around the globe, as you said, and that's a huge component to it.
Well, and I don't think we self-identify as members of a global tribe of people who work in these places called casinos, right? Like that just doesn't happen. We all go to G2E or we go to right, but that's different. That's a trade show. This is an experience where you are encouraged. In fact, we insist upon you identifying as a member of this community, and it becomes a community indeed, right? As you can see here, right? Of folks who you don't, we always say on the first cocktail hour on the first night, look around you. These are folks that you've never met before in your life, and these will become some of your favorite people on the planet. And one of the worst kept secrets about it is it's not so much us as superstars on the stage as speakers who are amazing as it is you. It's the attendees, right? You probably learned as much from each other as you learned from any of us on the stage. And that's pretty special too, because again, like you said, you learn that this is an industry, and you learn that, hey, I can hang, right? And these folks trust me. And that's a neat moment to see from the stage. It's neat to hear you say that, Kyle.
And then
there's the workroom.
We won't reveal details, but there is work. If you think you're coming here just to hang out and have some fun, there's that, but there's a lot
Robbie's
of this.
Not worried, but Ben's like hard at work, probably at the numbers, right? No, it's this is one of the work rooms where you go off after hours. And again, I will say this: the results, we always give the project out at the beginning of the week, and people say, "No way, that's not even possible to do by the end of this program." And then by the end, each one of them are amazingly high quality final projects that, we shoot for diversity within each group, right? Both in terms of cultural and nationalities, but also in terms of skill sets. So there typically is somebody like Ben who's really good with numbers, right? There's typically somebody else who comes from the tech sector, like Chandra there. Again, we typically try to have folks, and we do all sorts of assessments of your business skills, who have more artistic brains, who have more quantitative brains, folks from compliance, folks from security, folks from HR, folks from marketing, all under one roof and one team. And once more, the results are just astounding to those of us who are lucky enough to get to be celebrity judges at the end.
And it's rewarding too, right? I think that's what I could say about this group right here. Like, look at how happy, look at those faces.
Look at the Brazilian flag. Again, there is tremendous cultural diversity and without giving too much away, cultural education that goes on there in a way that, again, it's not anybody's fault, right? It's just that we all get so busy in our days that you don't necessarily think of the world beyond our nose. And this, there's no getting away from it, right? You have to think about the world beyond and connect with it.
Yeah. Look at those two guys.
Hey, look at that. Look at me. I think I'm wearing the same jacket, actually. I only got one jacket, right? Gosh, that's hilarious.
Apologies for those listening via podcast, but we're just taking the cruise down memory lane of some of my pictures of my experience at EDP.
Oh, I love that.
Highly recommend, if you guys can't, if you're listening right now, to check out the video Next Level Casino Careers so you can see the images here. Yeah. But this is Bo and I, and honestly, Bo, I'm thankful for this experience too, because not only we've stayed in touch, also, just the guest speakers that you have. So not only just the community of attendance there, but your team, your faculty, the guest speakers you have, they're so approachable.
Yeah.
And they create relationships, and you're allowed to pick their brain. And that's something right. I tried to do.
You know where that comes from, Kyle? Again, just because this is the spirit of the podcast. So I'm a gaming management professor, right? One of my fellow gaming management professors that'll be familiar, I'm sure, to folks in your audience, is Jimmy Kilby, who was an institution in gaming management at UNLV for 1 million years. And Jimmy Kilby always had the Kilby lifetime guarantee. The last class of the semester, he would say to his whole class of gaming management students, "You now have the Kilby lifetime guarantee. You've sat through 18 weeks of me. Now you get a lifetime guarantee. You can take advantage of it or you never have to. But here's my phone number. You can call me anytime for the rest. I'll answer the phone 20 years from now. And if you have questions or want to talk about it, I promise you I'll. And so we actually, as we initiate our faculty into the role of executive development program faculty, we say, look, we'd love it if all of you would also extend the Kilby lifetime guarantee, where they can reach out to you from here on out. And invariably, because we pick good folks, they're all like, I love that. Absolutely. Like, I'd love to stay in touch with these. Tell them they can reach out anytime. Give them my phone number. Right. And next thing you know, you're picking up the phone and talking to a CEO and somebody you never thought you'd have a relationship with, but you do.
And I could say that is absolutely true, because I actually did that with some of the folks there.
Oh,
and then look at this. So, Bo, there's a bigger story behind this picture. This is not two people just getting dinner. You want to paint the scene as far as what you were doing in Arizona and why we were having dinner on this day.
Was this that day? Was this?
This was that day. Yes.
Like that day, like the day I'm pointing to the Raiders thing, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Gosh, that's amazing. So that day was a day where the Raiders got voted into existence at the Biltmore Hotel in neighboring Scottsdale. And not too far at all from where we were in that photo. And yeah, should I tell the whole story of what happened that day and the roots of that day and what happened at the end? So yeah, so that's the story.
Yeah. And I'm gonna actually go to the next picture, because I think it's, gosh, and then I want to go through what your head was like at this moment. But man, like,
yeah, right. that is that day. That's oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So here's the curiosity gap that I'm creating. You see Bo, you see him there with the Raiders owner. Bo, you paint the scene as far as this path that you were on with the Las Vegas Raiders and how it came to existence.
You should totally do a podcast. You're good at this, man. Setting stage and lobbing me softballs. So the story of the Las Vegas Raiders very much starts in an executive education classroom, not the one that Kyle was in, but in one I was teaching at the International Gaming Institute. And it was a day where the NFL had taken another shot at Las Vegas in the press. And I said to the group of students, and again, these were folks who were in the industry, not UNLV undergrad students, because we do both those classes. And I said, this is harder. If you want to be a CEO in this industry, it's harder than being a CEO of like a furniture company, because you have to be good, not just at the walls inward stuff. Like if you're a furniture business, you have to know your furniture inside and out, right? That's true of all businesses. But you have to be good at the walls outward stuff, because again, the NFL took a shot today at Las Vegas and gambling. And if you want to lead in this industry, you got to fend off those shots. But here's the problem. The NFL doesn't know A, B, C, and D. Nobody understands about sports betting that X, Y, and Z. And during the first break, a gentleman walked up and he said, "Hi, Bo, I'm Napoleon." And it was Napoleon McCallum, the famous running back for the Naval Academy and then Oakland Raiders. And he is chief community officer for Las Vegas Sands. So he was in the class. And he said, I got to tell you, that was fascinating to me, because I used to be a running back for the Raiders. And I got to tell you, every time I meet with Mark Davis at Alumni Weekend, and there's a photo of Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, I say, because I live in Las Vegas, you guys should move to Vegas. I love Vegas. You should move here. And he says, we have tried for years to bring that up. In fact, we reserved LasVegasRaiders.com in like 1999. But every time we bring it up with the NFL, they say, but the gambling, but the gambling, but the gambling. What part of no don't you understand? And then Napoleon says something magical. He says, I think I heard some answers to some of the questions that they have. Do you want to meet Mark Davis? And I said, sure. Then thinking, well, that'll never happen, right? This will be one of those stories that flames out. Sure enough, a few short weeks later, they fly a private jet into the private jet terminal just off of McCarran Airport. UNLV police escort them to the UNLV International Gaming Institute, where we had gathered a small group of dignitaries, including some folks from Napoleon's office, including the president of the university. And Mark Davis, there he is, sat right across from me, and he said, Napoleon tells me you're the guy that's got all the answers. And I thought, oh, dear, right? Lay this out for me. And I said, well, the NFL believes A, B, and C, but really we've done research on all this at the Gaming Institute. Those fears are yesterday. And by the end of the lecture, he goes, can you put all that in a fat report? And I was like, sure, that's what we do, right? We're professor types. And then he said, we're going to be doing a lot of steak dinners with a lot of owners, because I got to tell you, here's the way it works. The math's simple. You need 30. There are 32 owners in the NFL. You need 24 of them to vote thumbs up to move a team from one city to another. You got one. We need 23 more votes. We're going to do some cruising. But on that day, on the previous picture where you and I are hanging out, that's amazing. I had forgotten that we hung out on that day. Scott, with the owner, fast forward to that day, the owners meeting happened. Of course, the grown-ups were in the room. I was nowhere near the room, but I was outside the room. And I got the text from inside. Yes, 31. No, 1. The Las Vegas Raiders have been voted into existence. And so talk about an amazing impact of your classroom, right? And I always tell my students this, again, this is a good story for this audience. What if Napoleon had done the thing that I used to do in my class, which is STFU, right? Like I used to sit in the back. And you probably were like this too, right? Because we're athletes. You sit in the back and I think, well, I might have something to say, but it might be stupid. I'm not going to say it, right? What if Napoleon had done that day? What if Napoleon had not taken the really important stuff that he knew and introduced it, injected it into the classroom, right? And brought it up and talked about it. So I always say to my students, make sure you talk, make sure you participate, because you know stuff, right? On that day, Napoleon knew stuff that changed the world and led to, as you can see there, me getting a chance to, that was the view I had as I cut the ribbon to unveil a $2 billion stadium that never would have happened if a student in a classroom had stayed quiet. That shows you, man, believe in yourself, right? Go talk, go demand stuff of your education and of your classrooms, because you never know, right? You never know what might happen.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, Bo, and I'm glad that you put it that way, is speak up even when you don't want to. Yes. Because what's the alternative? What's that look like? You bring that home, you're laying on your bed, and you're thinking, man, I should have said this, or what if you keep that idea inside? And that's just not a good way to live. And if you want to take your career to the next level, going back to what we're doing this podcast for, you have to kind of speak up.
That's right. That's right. I always say it's your education, right? Make it yours. Grab it, right? It's something that is yours and only yours. And you can actually, probably have more freedom to configure it, especially today than ever, and more than you might think, right? Get smarter every day, right? I always used to, as a baseball player, I'd always think when I'd cross over the foul line, at like the beginning of a practice day, like, I want to be better when I come back over this foul line the next, at the end of this practice, right? That's what I want for today. And it was never a lot better, right? It was never like I went from a puny guy to a guy that was hitting 500-foot balls, home runs or whatever. It was always tiny, right? And that's totally okay. Like when you're a kid, you think, oh, I got to get like light years better. No, it's small. It's actually tiny, tiny bites that lead to it.
Yep. And that's something, going back to EDP, that's something you said every day that always resonated with me, would just get better every day. Even if it's the little smallest percentage, that's a building block.
That's what we're here for, right? Like #get better, we used to say at EDP. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. So last thought on this slide here, going back to what you said earlier, being a Las Vegas local, being a kid. And then here you are playing a part in this story that brings a legendary franchise to Las Vegas. What's going through your mind this day?
Oh my gosh. I think I used to ride BMX bikes literally on the dirt that's probably about 75 feet beneath me in that picture where I'm holding the scissors, right? Like I literally used to chase lizards in what used to just be a vast desert right where that was, right? And I mean, that's not an exaggeration, right? It was all desert. It was a relatively small place, and never in a million years, that's a cliche, never in a million years. But again, never in a million years would I have imagined that the Oakland Raiders, right? I was watching Bo Jackson, my namesake, bulldoze people for the Raiders back when I was a kid, right? Never would I have imagined that this day would happen someday. I would never imagine, frankly, let's take it broader, that the gaming industry would have the level of popularity that it had, that it does now. Think about the ways that like Singapore is a place, right, that was basically an uncredited celebrity star in the movie Crazy Rich Asians. If you've seen Crazy Rich Asians, the Marina Bay Sands Hotel Casino Resort is basically a character in that movie. It's so cool. It's so mainstream. It's so positively valued in such a fascinating place that it's almost like a backdrop in a movie that is designed to showcase opulence and coolness and all that sort of stuff. Singapore is a place that before, when I first went to Singapore, and that Singapore Marina Bay Sands that is a star in that movie was just marshland. And the Singapore government was saying, okay, we're thinking about tourism development. We're thinking about casinos. What do you think? I remember thinking, this is a place where it is illegal to chew gum right now. And you're going to bring in casinos, which are like stigmatized and, not allowed like virtually everywhere, right? Like what an amazing moment that was. There was a time when I was a kid when gambling was basically in Las Vegas and Atlantic City. Now it's in 48 of the 50 states. And of course, a similar proportion of jurisdictions worldwide, right? That's an amazingly global industry. And yet sometimes I think those of us who are in this industry don't think of ourselves as in the same way that somebody who works for Google clearly works in a global industry. So do we.
Yeah, it's very true. I think I got one more slide here. So,
oh dear.
And then here you are.
You want me to recreate that pose?
Yeah. Look at that statue.
I'm being pensive there. I'm thinking.
For those who can't see, this is a legit clip from the New York Times, which featured the Dr. Bo Bernhard. So it's a great article. And once again, just comes full circle. And here you are being featured in the New York Times.
Crazy. Yeah. I mean, literally there's my backdrop. And the New York Times had a very innocuous and understandable question. This was during the week of the NFL draft, right? And the NFL draft, if you didn't see, was done up here in Las Vegas like it never had been done up before. We just brought out all the Las Vegas things. And so the New York Times was like, how did this happen? Right? How did we get here? And so, they came out to my office here again at Blackfire Innovation Hub, which is a place that, again, invents crazy gambling games and all sorts of innovations for hotel rooms and restaurants and everything else. And we talked about, the story that I just told you about the Raiders.
Man, so
crazy.
What a ride. And I know your ride is just getting started in a lot of ways. So I can't wait to see where it takes you, Bo.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Bo, I want to pivot here a little bit because your insight is key because you have been exposed to just so many different leaders, both current leaders, future leaders, people who've really made a difference and are movers and shakers in the casino and hospitality industry. Going back to the audience here, what are some common threads or some common traits that those individuals have in common for those who succeed and who are really at the top of their game to possibly maybe those who are not, and that's okay, but what are some common threads of those who are very successful in this industry?
Ooh, great question, right? So, what are some commonalities that leaders all have? I'm actually going to quote an EDP speaker first because I thought this was a great line. Poonam Mathur, who is not just a legendary gaming industry leader, she's a legendary leader. She said, I might bungle this, but it's something to the effect of, at the end of the day, there's really one thing that that defines a leader. Leadership inspires followership, right? You can lead, but if nobody's following, you ain't leading, right? The thing that all the great leaders that all of us can come up with have in common is that people genuinely followed them, right? Like genuinely emulated them, genuinely did things alongside and empowered by them, right? And when I think about leaders in my world, I don't know if this is true for you, Kyle, but those are the best coaches I had, right? The ones I'd run through a wall for. But I followed them. I know that sounds like ridiculously overly simplified, but at the end of the day, that's what matters. I really have been lucky. I was hired at the executive director level of the Gaming Institute by Don Snyder, who was really one of the founding CEOs. He led Boyd Gaming, but he also led the American Gaming Association, the redevelopment of downtown Las Vegas in a lot of ways. He was the founding figure with the Smith Center for Performing Arts, which made Las Vegas suddenly a ballet hub and an arts center. And in so many ways. And then just down the hall from me now, Jan Jones Blackhurst, who was the 2-term mayor of Las Vegas. She's also an EDP a faculty member and a longtime executive with Caesars, in addition to small business owner and entrepreneur. She just is, she's a force of nature and my teacher and mentor. And like a lot of us, I had a lot of great coaches, a lot of great leaders. Those two as industry leaders have just been role models. I follow them and would follow them off a cliff. Hope I never have to, but you know what I mean? That metaphor that sticks because we think about leaders in that way. So I know it sounds overly simple, but it's about followership, right? You might think that I've read a lot of leadership books and I do all the things, right? I led, but nobody followed. What's the meaning of led in that sentence? Did you really? No, you didn't, right? Yeah, I was leading, man, but they just weren't following. Well, then you weren't leading, right?
Yeah.
And so again, think about the ways in which people are actually following you, I think is a useful sort of check yourself moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Any practical guidance on that front? So let's just say I'm a manager, I'm a VP, I'm a director, whatever that position is, right? I'm leading people, but to your point, are they actually following me? Like, are they motivated? You know, is there a purpose? Is there anything on that front to kind of help pull people and motivate people so that you are a leader who people actually want to follow?
Yeah. So I just read recently, maybe you've read Radical Candor, which is about, one of the basic arguments is you have to be exceedingly genuine and oftentimes vulnerable. There's a little Brene Brown vulnerability to this too, in being open and truly developing the kinds of bonds that lead people to trust you and then follow. And that requires something that I don't think was required of our grandfathers, right, and our grandmothers. There, for a long time, leadership was kind of like those coaches that you and I had that would just bark at you all the time, right, and just sort of scream. And the idea of there being vulnerability there or connection there was just not happening. I don't think we live in that world anymore. I don't know if you agree, Kyle. I don't know if you had those kinds of coaches like I did. But I think the world's changing, right? And as somebody who hangs out with 18 to 22-year-olds constantly at university campuses, I really don't think the next generation wants this. So again, I think as a practical matter, it really is, it sounds overly simple, but it's about relationships, right? And relationships are on a foundation of communication. But again, the degree to which somebody really does trust you, which is going to require connection time, right? The great phrase that Tom Peters is the great business guru. And he came up with the phrase management by walking around or wandering around, MBWA. And of course, you'll have folks, leaders who will say to their mentors, gosh, here's what sucks about my office. Every time I walk around, I get pulled into one of my, employees' offices and they just talk about their kids and their problems. And I'm constantly like, dealing with all of their issues and trying to help them figure out their issues. And all I ever do, I never get down to my desk because all I ever do is get pulled into offices and I never make it back. I'm always doing that. And the mentor, of course, says, "Oh, you mean leading? You're leading. You're managing. That's what managing is, right? It's not like sitting at a desk, right? It's in Tom's great phrase. It's managing by wandering around, right? And that's where you do create those. And I think again, in a rigid Mad Men world, that probably wasn't the case as much, right? But today, my gosh, that has to be the future.
Yep, absolutely. And speaking of relationships, Bo, I know that's something that you're really good at. I mean, you have built kind of the superstar team there at the UNLV on the executive director, international gaming, and then also Blackfire Innovation, which you've mentioned. If you wouldn't mind, speak to a little bit about that program and what you've built there at UNLV.
Sure.
Because it's super fascinating what you've done. And I think a lot of it piggybacks on what you've done with relationships.
It does. It completely 100% piggybacks on relationships. So I'll start by telling the stories of those people and leaders who form this network of folks who work here with me. So Alan Feldman, who you know from the executive development program, was basically the voice that Steve Wynn hired from a fancy Beverly Hills PR firm to come tell a little story about a little place with a volcano called the Mirage in 1989, when the world needed it to understand this needed some explaining, right? It had never been, nothing of this had ever been scoped, had ever been tried before. And so he was that guy and was that guy for generations. And also was a teacher at heart. And I always used to say to Alan, as we'd be on panels together or just hanging out together, we're keeping a seat warm for you over at UNLV because you're a teacher, my friend. And when he got to the point in his career where he said, you know what, with this chapter of my life, I want to teach. I want to talk about the things that I've been through and share it. He made the leap, right? Jan Jones Blackhurst, who I've already mentioned, made that same leap. And that was an amazing thing. She now works here at UNLV. Becky Harris, the first ever female chair of the Nevada Gaming Control Board, made the leap from that perch to UNLV's International Gaming Institute, where she talks about leadership and in women in gaming leadership, right, in an amazing way. And on the innovation front, two folks in particular. One was Mark Yosoloff, who was the CEO of Shuffle Master for years, inventor of games like Mississippi Stud, for example. He told me once at a lunch, I don't want to die with this knowledge. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I've invented some games and I know what makes games fun. I want to teach a class where the final exam is invent a game and showcase it. And that's it. No midterm, no papers, none of that stuff. I just want to invent a gambling game. And I was like, all right. And so he joined the faculty, and then we ended up building a Center for Gaming Innovation around that. We also hired Dr. Robert Rippey, who I think was probably faculty at EDP the year you were there, as our head of hospitality innovation. So everything outside of the casino. He was working at Venetian, where he introduced the first esports event in the history of the Las Vegas Strip. It did really, really well. But the rest of the executive team and leadership was like, we don't like it. That's weird. Video games, right? Get away. And again, I had approached him saying, in the university environment, you can play with this stuff. You can play with innovation. We got this crazy class inventing gambling games. What if you did that with the rest of the resort? And soon enough, he was head of a place called the Hospitality Innovation Center, where he's had students who have invented things like a window that turns into the television. So you walk into the hotel room and you turn on the window, and the window then becomes your big screen, which is amazing, right? They have bed sheets that require no water because they melt in a high temperature machine, then come out totally sterilized as brand new reconstituted sheets, right? And all of those folks and programs now live at a place called Blackfire Innovation. Grown-up industries, right, in places like Southern California, like Hollywood. Let's think about Hollywood. And USC and UCLA have been in the news of late. UCLA and USC are also places that have tremendous film schools, right? And programs that have for years invented, patented, all sorts of stuff that have then ended up being bought by like Pixar to transform the way that cartoons sort of move on your screen, right? And grown-up industries like Hollywood have these university innovation pipelines that churn out not just inventions, but also killer students who are associated with those inventions, right? Who then populate, both the physical and the human infrastructure of that industry, which helps you, if you're Hollywood, fend off like Bollywood when Bollywood wants to become the global capital of filmmaking. Well, the gaming industry, again, is a baby university. It's never really had a Blackfire, right? It's never had a place that is a place to come innovate, a sandbox. And so in here, we have 75 companies. Many of them are gaming companies, but we have LG here. We have Panasonic here. We have Intel here. We have Adobe here. We have a lot of the AWS is here. T-Mobile is here. Because again, the idea of a collaborative, innovative sandbox, which is something that once more we have in energy in Houston, we have in film in Hollywood, and now the gaming industry has its Blackfire Innovation here in Las Vegas, and man, it's a fun place to play. So anybody in the audience, if you ever want to check in, you get a Kilby lifetime guarantee. Call me, reach out. If you're in Las Vegas, we'll give you the full tour. It is a fascinating place for gaming innovators.
I'm going to take you up on that tour, Bo.
You got to come see it.
How long is Blackfire Innovation? That
it's brand new. So it opened right at the dawn of the COVID era. So it's basically been unopened, but open for the majority of its history. But yeah, less than 2 years, right? And so we're in a situation where we've come out of the COVID storm, just guns blazing, and in a way that has led to the whole building is now full. In fact, 2 tech unicorns who also happen to be gaming tech companies are about to move into the second floor, which will be populated by 2 tech unicorns in game, which is amazing. GeoComply, which does, of course, geofencing and cybersecurity, and Sightline, which is of course, a cashless and wagering company that facilitates that fintech world. They're both moving into the second floor. The third floor is a startup space that looks like it fell out of Silicon Valley with all sorts. I just had somebody who's invented a digital license plate down there. A young guy who is going to take over the world. And that sort of co-working, almost WeWork space that's very much a UNLV space is kind of the heartbeat of our facility. And our first floor is now filled with, among other things, an accelerator for your business to go from hopefully, point A to point infinity and grow. So yeah, it's a neat startup place. These places are very common in Austin and in Silicon Valley and in India, right? But they haven't really existed in the gaming world until now. Now we've built full incubator, accelerator, tech park facilities in a way that I think the industry is going to find really compelling as they engage it.
That is awesome. Bo, say 10 years from now, we're doing this interview, 2020, 2032. Can't do my math. It's Friday, 2032. There you go. 10 years from now, right? We're doing this interview. If I were to say Blackfire Innovation is success, what does that look like 10 years from now?
Oh man, if I were more tech inclined, I would actually pick up my laptop and do a panorama, because surrounding me are 120 acres of desert. Those 120 acres will be full. And not just gaming, by the way. I'm a big believer in, I've recently filed a trademark on the fun economy. So here's the fun economy, Kyle. Tell me what you think about this. In 2019, for the first time in human history, 10% of the world economy, meaning 1 in 10 dollars, pesos, euros, was spent on tourism, which is an amazing thing, right? 10% was spent on the fun that is tourism, right? Sports this year is about to hit like 1% of gross world product. Again, 1 in 100 dollars, pesos, euros, yen, whatever. Another 4 to 5%, depending on how wide you cast the net, is entertainment, video games, movies, all the different things, right? Gaming that we think of. So that's, call it 15% of the world's economy is the fun economy. Manufacturing is only 11% of the economy. Agriculture is only 3.5%. Agriculture and manufacturing, which, like, when you think of all the great cities in America, for example, they were founded on that, right? Like cities like St. Louis and like Buffalo, right? Were like on a waterway and you made stuff and then you shipped it to the world. That's awesome. That part of the economy is less than the fun economy. So it used to be the fun economy was fun, but not really relevant, because it's just kind of irrelevant stuff that's done in places like Las Vegas or at Disneyland. Now it's growing, and it's going to keep growing, because the first thing that people who join the middle class worldwide, the first thing that they do when they've bought everything that they need, basic necessities, is fun, right? And guess what industry we're in, Kyle? We're in the fun industry, right? And so I hope this whole place is filled with fun economy buildings dedicated to stuff you and I, if you had asked us today, what's again, whatever technology 10 years from now is the killer app or the killer tech, right? We will not have heard of that word. And I hope that it was invented right over my shoulder in this desert that exists right here.
It's a great answer. And that's a great insight, because that was going to be my follow-up question. You answered it, which is, do you think that's here to stay? And I think you're right. I think fun's growing. And I think people now know that the material things that I own, those don't fulfill me, versus the experiences and the fun, those do.
That's right. And, even as an industry, right? If you and I had grown up in the 50s, our dads would have probably said, go into something respectable, like, manufacturing with like Procter and Gamble, right? Because that's, by gosh, and that's actually shrinking, that world, right? And the world of fun is a legitimate business to go into now, right? You should be proud and go study fun, because the fun economy is growing. So I think the fun economy is, and the world economy is bending in our direction, Kyle, right? You can say, well, no, that those aren't really good industries or legitimate industries. They're kind of superfluous. But you would be doing so in ignorance of global economic numbers that are pretty potent and powerful and growing. So to all the kids out there, right, invest in fun, both for your own well-being, but also as a career, because the fun economy is growing.
Absolutely. Last question on this topic, Bo, I want to ask you, and then I'll get to my final questions here. Something that I've observed with you that I don't think maybe you talk about, but maybe you don't give yourself enough credit, is you are really good at putting together a team. Like you just talking about the development of this team, of Blackfire Innovation. So I'm curious, going back to the audience here, any tips as it relates to, because that's a big part of becoming a leader, right? Is understanding you can't do it alone. You need experts in other fields where you might have blind spots or you just need some help. And man, if you put together a collection of all-stars we talked about earlier. So on that front, any tips out there as far as when you do put together a team, whatever that might look like for you, how do you get people to buy in?
Yeah. So two things I'll say. One is I don't know if I put this up at EDP the year you were there or not. But I think that there is a quadrant, right? If you can divide human beings into 4 quadrants, and along one axis is really nice and then really not so nice. On the other axis is, really competent, smart, and then, not so much, right? The quadrant that's like not nice and not good at their job, like, what are you doing? Like, don't ever touch those folks. But the people in the opposite quadrant that are as smart as they are nice, and they're as nice as they are smart, and they're through the roof on both, that's where I love to hire. That's where I love to hire. Because again, that will pay off not only in competence, of course, but also in terms of day-to-day, how the team actually works. So again, that probably sounds oversimplified, but hire in the quadrant, as nice as they are smart, as smart as they are nice. The other thing I would say about teams, I've only learned recently through a book called Rebel Ideas. This is Matthew Syed, who's kind of a Malcolm Gladwell of England. The book Rebel Ideas, the UNLV mascot's the Rebel, so I sound biased, but it's his book. And Rebel Ideas makes a really interesting argument that culminates in teams. So follow me here. He says, we've been going about intelligence all wrong. For a long time, we thought like, okay, IQ, like what's Kyle Anderson's IQ? And that's his smarts. And then we realized, well, IQ is kind of like culturally biased and kind of bogus. EQ, right, really matters. And social intelligence, emotional intelligence. And then there's this, I love positive intelligence, your capacity to see opportunity rather than to see storms behind every cloud, right? That actually is a thing. PQ is a measurement. But what Syed says is each one of those measurements of intelligence are fundamentally flawed because they take place at the individual level, where in the world that we live in today, it's better to think of intelligence as something that is achieved in a group, because groups are what actually solve problems. We love to think about heroes as singular, like Edison or Einstein, who like were these singular geniuses when even they weren't, by the way. But certainly with the complexity of problems today, intelligence should be thought of as group intelligence, and nobody is smart at all of the things. So whereas maybe me and my meathead buddies on my college, teams could cover if the world of things that we need to cover on this team is this big circle. All of us are pretty much overlapping because we're the same meatheads that know the same stuff, right? You need to hire cognitively diverse teams that cover the range of the things. It's okay to not be good at X, to be horrible at Y, because that's what teams do, is you hire to backstop your weaknesses, and you bring in Kyle, who's awesome at X, right? Kyle is, a gunner. He can shoot from 35 feet away. Man, I'm a horrible shooter, but I got Kyle, right? That's how I solve that problem, right? So again, Rebel Ideas, I highly recommend the read. It's about cognitive diversity and how cognitively diverse teams are actually the smartest teams and are the way to go after problems. Nobody does it alone, man. Nobody. That's not a cliche. It's true. And it's true even of the people that we think of as singular genius leaders that like solved, great scientific questions by themselves. Even they didn't, if you read their biographies, do it that way.
Man, you're making the case for why I want my kids to be in team sports.
Team
right?
sports, I totally.
It just has so many implications as far as life lessons, whether you go to the collegiate level or the pro level or whatever. You're 100% right. Bo, I have some final questions to get you out of here on. So, what would Bo be doing if you were not doing what you're doing today?
Oh, I always thought of I have a lot of teachers in my family, and I always love sports. So I might be a high school coach at this point. I would have loved that. At one point I did chase a ball around for a little bit of money, but it never enough. And then, my knee went and I was done. I'd probably be a high school coach. I think I'd enjoy it.
I could see that. Speaking of sports, if there was only one sport you could be associated with, watch, play, whatever, what's that one sport?
I am such a polyamorous sports fan. That's probably a phrase that's never been used in the history of the English language. I am polyamorous, Kyle. I am so getting into F1 right now in a way I never was before. I don't know if you're like me and watching this Netflix show. So that is the hardest imaginable question. It probably, though, and this is because I am a global traveler now, and the international language is not love, it's soccer. It really is. If you want to be able to immediately break the ice in Singapore or South Africa or South Korea or Brazil or Poland or England, and by the way, you do, right? You want to be that person that's good on a global stage. You got to get fluent at soccer. You don't have to, but what a great way, what a great cheat code to get great at, back to all the points we were talking about, relationships. Man, if you can talk soccer and watch a game intelligently in Italy, you'll be beloved, and beloved isn't something to be dismissed. Jan Jones talks about this with leadership all the time. First, I get people to like me, and then I get them to do what I want them to do, she says. And it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what you do. And you totally did that with me. And you're like the most amazing leader I've ever met, right? And you can get people to like you through soccer. And that sounds Machiavellian, but it's not good if you genuinely love it. And I genuinely love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that global perspective too. It's truly the one global sport.
Anywhere in the world, you can talk to people about
it. Yep. Favorite movie?
You know what I like? I really dig the documentaries that like follow the big wave surfers, or what's that movie with the guy that recently free soloed, the Yosemite, like stuff like that, right? Riding Giants is one of those big wave movies where, again, these are athletes that are deeply eloquent, I think because they put their lives on the line when they ride like 80-foot waves off the coast of Hawaii or Tahiti. That one really, it just grabs me, and I can watch it over and over and over again. I love those kinds of movies.
I'm blanking on it too, but I know the documentaries you're talking about, those free climbers.
Free solo, Alex Honnold is the climber. But again, the guy climbed crazy, mountain cliffs with no equipment. It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. So fill in the blank here. As I've gotten older, I have realized blank is overrated.
Ooh. Something in the world of anxiety, stress, and we think that people who are like constantly like worried about things and intensively evaluating things are like on it, when in fact they're losing it. They're losing, they're not winning. Again, I think we think of intensity and folks who like, sometimes in sports even, like who just crazy compete at every moment at every level. And it feeds, again, sort of a constant obsession and rumination about things. What I've since learned is that level of competitiveness is actually overrated. That runs counter to my sports background. But again, competitiveness and the sort of intensity and constant sort of stress associated with and constant need to constantly prove yourself, it eats away at cognitive space. You don't think as freely, you don't think as well, and you definitely don't think about collaboration. So again, I know this is my totally controversial thought. I know we're supposed to think of like the Michael Jordans of the world as these hyper-competitive, massive success stories. But you know what he's blind to, and maybe this didn't hurt him on the basketball court as much, but all the opportunities for collaboration, right, that your hyper-competitive nature turns your brain off to. You're turning part of your brain off when you get hyper focused on that world. I don't know if I said that as clearly as I could, but what's overrated is the competitive spirit when it's at its most extreme.
Yep, absolutely. There's a story I heard. It was so simple, but I'm like, yeah, that's right. If you're in a race and you're busy doing this, you're not going to be running as fast as you can if you're looking at the others.
It's not about relative well-being at the end of the day. It's about absolute well-being. It's not about how well you're doing compared to your neighbor as you try to keep up with the Joneses and have the same cool car that the Joneses have. That doesn't matter, right? And you don't learn that till later in life too, right? That doesn't matter. All that matters is you and your well-being, right? And your kids' well-being. It's absolute well-being, not well-being compared to others.
Yep. Comparison is the thief of joy, I think they say.
Totally the thief of joy.
2 more questions. And thanks again, Bo, for joining us here today. Morning or evening routine that you have found beneficial that you think would help others?
So I will share that this actually comes from Tony Hsieh, Hsieh, the founder of Zappos, who's no longer with us, sadly. This is my morning routine, and it's a variation of what he called Yesterbox. Yesterbox is an email strategy, but I actually expanded into all sorts of different things. So we all get obsessed with like clearing our email box to 0, right? He would do the thing every day where he would star, the important emails. He said, nothing was ever super, super urgent. And then first thing in the morning, he cleared yesterday's emails, right? First thing in the morning. He called it his Yester box, and he cleared his Yester box. I have taken to not only doing that with email, but doing that with a whole range of things, whereby as they come up during the course of my day, rather than being, again, back to my previous answer, constantly obsessed with, oh no, this crisis has arisen, this crisis, right? I'm an early riser now, and every year I get up earlier, it seems like. But in the morning, I'll just dedicate myself to sort of clearing my literal and figurative email box, right? And then I can engage my day much more freely and much more effectively. So the Yesterbox approach to email and to life's seeming crises that need to be all answered right now has just been a godsend.
Yeah, absolutely. Energy conservation, something I've found, and now that I have 3 young kids, energy conservation is a real thing. You only have so much. I don't care how busy you are. Back to your earlier point, the monkey mind.
Yeah.
It's important that you invest wisely.
You know where I learned that, Kyle, was soccer. Soccer is a crazy fitness sport. I had a teammate that once said fitness is 90% of this game. And that was an intentional exaggeration to emphasize how much it was. But one of the things I learned is I used to think I had to look like I was always hustling, right? And then I realized like I got way too tired way too early, and that the really good players actually strategically picked their rest times, right? And I didn't have to be monkey minding on the field. And again, impressing who, right? The ball's out and I'm sprinting back on defense or whatever, right? Like knowing when to reserve energy and preserve energy, man, that was important in soccer. And I never thought about that in the business world, but you're totally right.
And then final question, Bo, we get everybody out in this question. So next level casino careers, what is 3 things somebody could start doing today to help take their career to the next level?
Invest in your education. And again, education doesn't have to be formal, right? For sure. I think back to monkey mind and the intensity thing that sounds like you and I both think about a lot. I think there's a reason why every other Harvard Business Review and tons of business magazines have something on why CEOs meditate. I don't want to get too woo-woo here, but there's a reason why it works. And it actually is neuroplasticity. It's about retraining your brain to not get pulled into every monkey mind thought or into, in the business world, every crisis, in the leadership world, every problem that you could attend to. Meditation is literally training your brain to get back to the breath, to get back to, to a world where you're not getting constantly pulled into everything. And so far from it being a woo-woo thing, it's a neuroscientific, neuroplastic thing. So that's been a huge thing for me, is meditation. And the Harvard Business Review articles on why CEOs meditate are enough for the skeptical. And third thing, be nice, because you never know. One of the people you met, so you always ask, how do I get these dream teams around? One of the Moneyball guys is David Forst, who comes to the executive development program. He's the general manager of the Oakland A's, and he was my college baseball teammate. And David Forst was one of those guys who his freshman year, he was injured, he was miserable, he was cold because he was from Los Angeles. He was a freshman when I was a cool senior. I had no idea that this guy would grow up to be cool, right? But I, really took to him. We were from the same part of the country. Fast forward to a time where there's a Brad Pitt movie that depicts his business world in arguably one of the most influential business books of our time, was ultimately the Moneyball book. And he was one of the stars in it, right? I didn't know that, but be nice to people, because by gosh, you never know, right? And the old saying about folks who are going on the way up, you'll see them on the way down, right? And vice versa. Yeah, be nice to people, because you never know. Be kind.
Yeah, I think I've heard this quote too, and on the same vein is like, you could be, angry or mean. That might be winning at halftime. Some people can get by that way, but you're never going to win the game. It always falls short. So
true.
And Bo, I could say, just knowing you personally, you are someone who's kind. You're someone who's generous, and look at the success you've had. And once again, Bo, I just really want to appreciate and thank you for joining the show here today.
Well, you are too, Kyle. You get good at it when you're assessing. In my case, I've been in this business a long time and had tens of thousands of students. You are deeply kind and you are deeply smart, and it's been an honor.
I appreciate it. Thanks. Thank you, my friend, and we'll be in touch.
Sounds good.
Check out more episodes on nextlevelcasinocareers.com.